beat around the bush anymore. It's Clemson week, baby.
Well, there's Dalen Hayes. He said it best. It's here. No more waiting. Notre Dame versus Clemson. It's Clemson week. And Notre Dame hasn't been hiding behind it, Lou. Neither have we. So we're here. Clemson week. How's that sound?
Sounds pretty good because this truly was like a 6-game preliminary event. That's what it felt like, and that's not intended as any slight or disrespect. But the reality is, these 6 opponents that Notre Dame has played are combined 12 and 28. I've been doing research on this. I can't recall when every single of Notre Dame's first 6 opponents in a given year all had sub-500 records, as the case is this year. So it was sort of like that 6-week preliminary games before the main event.
Yeah, and that really was what this last game was. Of course, Notre Dame beating Georgia Tech 31-13, Georgia Tech dropping to 2-5, hinting at what you just said there, Lou. Setting up number 1 Clemson versus number 4 Notre Dame Saturday night under the lights on NBC. And kind of worth noting, Clemson barely hanging on to that number 1 spot in the polls. And they will be without Trevor Lawrence. Dabo Swinney said so after Clemson's 32-28 win over Boston College. And really, I think that was more interesting than anything that happened during Notre Dame's win. I think that news came out right before the second half started. And yeah, that was the most interesting development of that day as it relates to Notre Dame. I mean, in the column I wrote after the game, I used the word transactional to describe that win. Lou, I believe you used methodical, kind of hinting at the same thing. That was the best thing Notre Dame did in that game is just finish that game and just get it over with. Because, I mean, we all know at this point what's up next, what's important next, as they said. And now what's important next, to use Brian Kelly's term, is also what's important now. So kicking off Clemson week here on the latest episode of the Irish Huddle podcast. I'm Patrick Engel, joined as always by Lou Somogyi. It's Sunday, November 1st, 2020. It's All Saints Day. Follow us on Twitter at Patrick Engel _, that's ENGEL. And you can follow Lou at BGI _ Lou Somogyi, SOMOGYI. Don't miss out on all of our content coming up this week. And you can subscribe to blueandgold.com using the promo code ND12 for 1 to get access to blueandgold.com for an entire year for just $12. It's $1 a month. Does not get any better than that. That's ND12 FOR1. And as always, please make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you listen to your podcasts. If you'd be so kind, please leave us a rating, leave us a review, leave us 5 stars and nice comments if you like what you hear. Tell your friends about it. Or if you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content. So, Lou, just going back to really this pretty nondescript game. Like I said, the best thing Notre Dame did here was end the game and move on to the thing that we were all kind of anticipating and have been talking about since whenever they released this schedule. And, whenever we figured out a while ago that Clemson had a pretty good shot at being number 1 when it rolled into South Bend.
Just one quick note here. The final score actually was 34-28. Clemson did get safety at the end.
That's right.
To do that. But, while I was watching that game, man, my nerves were frayed because we had already published about 80% of our issues or sent to the printers where Clemson coming, here's the history against number 1, and these are the situations in number 1. It's like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to change about 16 pages here. And it's 28-10. They're down. This is what makes great champions, though. I thought one of the biggest assets Notre Dame had going into the Clemson game was that Clemson had not been tested at all. They had not been under any kind of fire, no game pressure. So now all of a sudden you're falling behind. You keep falling behind. It's 28-10. You have a second-team quarterback, 5-star granted, but still a true freshman. They were put. They were taken to the wall, and they responded tremendously. And I anticipate that was as beneficial to Clemson as the Louisville game was to Notre Dame, because you saw how Notre Dame came out the following week. And I anticipated that happening just because, you get people down, oh, are they really good? Now they're overrated, this or that. Nobody knows it more than the team itself of, we need to be much better than this. And, from a mental framework standpoint, my biggest problem with this Notre Dame Clemson game right now is all the pressure is completely on Notre Dame, because it's sort of like, here's your opportunity, Notre Dame. Clemson has to travel. They're coming up there. They lost their star quarterback. They have 3 defensive starters out, and, whether they'd even be healthy for Notre Dame. They've been looking more vulnerable. Even Syracuse a couple weeks ago came within 6 points of them at 27-21 before Clemson put it away. And now Boston College had them on the ropes. They're ripe for the picking. And Clemson is hearing all this, and I hate that. I really hate that. Just the same way I thought it was great that after that Louisville game where Notre Dame just snuck by, Notre Dame's overrated, Notre Dame's this, that, they're not. They responded tremendously against Pitt and methodically against Georgia Tech. So that would be, it's not just the physical aspect of knowing how great Clemson is and what they've been able to achieve over the last 5-6 years, but just now the mental framework with which they're going to be coming into this game, and how all the pressure is really on Notre Dame, because Clemson still has a mulligan. They lose to Notre Dame, they're going to win out. They're going to be in the ACC championship game, and it's going to be very difficult to beat them twice.
Especially with presumably Trevor Lawrence back at that point. I agree. Yeah, I think Notre Dame has more to prove here, that people will look at the opponent records and, they've played most of the teams in the ACC. They were at the bottom of the standings, and South Florida, which is maybe the worst team in the American Conference. And not to mention, yes, you kind of have to feel like, you've got the real opportunity to beat them with all the factors that you just mentioned. And, of course, this is presumably a better setup than whatever might happen in Charlotte. And Lou, you gave the people a little bit of an inside baseball look at how our weekly editions are produced. We almost had to sweat it out on Sunday, because when they released the AP poll, Clemson was number 1, like barely over Alabama, just 2 points in the polls ahead of Alabama. Clemson got 33 first-place votes. Alabama got 29. Like, seriously, 2 points. That's like literally one person flipping around Clemson and Alabama on their ballot from not having that number 1 come to visit anymore. So AP voters preserving that history. I'm obviously not a voter, but I'm curious if any of them were at least taking that into consideration of, like, we want this to be a historical game, and hey, this number 1 team didn't lose. I'm not going to drop them. They had the backup quarterback. But at any rate, before we really dive into too much of what's to come, we'll be doing that all week. We'll spend a little bit of time on the game that just was. So 31-13 really doesn't feel that close. I know the score said one thing, 7-7 early in the second quarter after that fumble return, but it's just another one of those games where you never have a thing in your mind where Notre Dame's going to lose this game. Second straight week where Notre Dame had a 100% post-game win expectancy. And, of course, that means just if you take the stats of just what happened, who should win. So pretty much if this game plays out as it did, Notre Dame's getting the win every single time. So, Lou, I ask you, what things from this game that stuck in your mind, I guess, as at least something new, something different, just anything maybe that raised your confidence level or in a sense in going into this week? I don't really think there was much Notre Dame could have done to raise it, but they got there, they won, and I don't think they lowered it. So what did you take away?
One thing, Patrick, and this is kind of off the beaten path a little bit here, but my goodness, I have never seen a coach at Notre Dame or maybe at any college have so many times a fumble inside the 10-yard line that's returned about 90 yards or inside even the 5-yard line the other way. I mean, let's go back to the nightmare in 2011, that opener against South Florida. Opening drive, Notre Dame gets inside the 3-yard line. Jonas Green fumbles, and it's not just a fumble, okay? They recover it, okay, fine, you got him pinned down. But then they go the other way for the touchdown. And that's instrumental in their 23-20 win of South Florida, one of the biggest upsets here. Later that same season, Notre Dame is inside USC's 5-yard line, chance to now, even up the game and everything. Fumble, goes all the way again, the other way for a touchdown. USC wins. Last year against Virginia Tech, right before halftime, Notre Dame is inside the 5-yard line. Jafar Armstrong goes straight up the middle. Boom, fumble, return 98 yards for a touchdown. It's not the fumble. It's like every time somebody goes and then goes 98 yards the other way. And the first thing I'm thinking with Georgia Tech, and Notre Dame did survive that Virginia Tech game with a dramatic 11th hour drive, but Georgia Tech, once again, it's 7-0. Notre Dame is in complete control. They've had possession for 17 of the first 19 minutes. First play of the second quarter, Kyron Williams fumbles. It's a 14-point swing because they go 9. It's not just a fumble. Now they go 93 yards the other way for a touchdown. And these ghosts start coming back, but then Notre Dame, right after that touchdown, answered with its own 75-yard touchdown drive, and you're saying, okay, they're fine. They don't make the mistakes other than that one there. I mean, that was their first turnover, but, when you have those dramatic 14-point swings in one fell swoop, you start kind of thinking to yourself, okay, is this going to be one of those days again? And, Notre Dame responded with the poise, and I think just the confidence of knowing we're the better team here. There's no need to panic. And, you're up 17-7 at halftime. Dalen Hayes' sack in the start of the third quarter, and the recovery by Myron Tungalovosa on a great spin move. Now you're up 24-7 after that touchdown drive, and you're pretty much in control.
Yeah, after that touchdown that they scored after the fumble recovery there, I thought, all right, we're done here. Play it out, get on to Clemson. That's that. So, but going back to what you said, Lou, I wonder how many times Notre Dame is in another team's record book as having facilitated the longest touchdown of any kind in school history. Do you remember offhand? I think, but I'm not remembering off the top of my head here, if that was the longest touchdown in Georgia Tech history. If
yes,
not,
it was. It was.
Okay, here we go. I thought so.
I'm sure it was for Virginia Tech last year and South Florida the year before.
Wow.
USC's was technically, I think, only 85 yards because it was like a bit of a
only 85. Yeah. But yeah, it's just a random occurrence, and really, it's just fumbles bouncing whatever way they want to, and they just didn't bounce Notre Dame's way any of those times. And bounced right to a guy who's fast. That's it. But how about that for Georgia Tech corners and Mary Walton? Span of 2 weeks, or 3 games, I should say. Pick off Trevor Lawrence, get the longest touchdown in your team's history against another top 5 team. About the only thing they really did well, though. And yeah, I just even then didn't think that this was at all a game they were in danger of losing. I mean, Brian Kelly talked about it, clean some things up, and of course, but they were able to survive the few things that they did.
Clemson had a situation like that too against Boston College, where Clemson's are down 14-7. They're driving, about to tie it up, and then all of a sudden Boston College goes the other way. It's like 21-7, and that's the first time I started getting like, this could be really interesting because Boston College really, really came ready to play.
Yeah, they were mad in a little bit of a sense, right? Or in a good way, it seemed like. Whereas, not being discussed or whatever, just seemingly wanted to make a statement. And they had the opportunity to with, all right, what's going on with Clemson? How are they reacting to this news? Gave them all you could handle. But to get back to the game the on-field happenings here for Notre Dame, yeah, I really don't think there was much outside of beating Georgia Tech 73-7 like Clemson did, and that was never going to happen. I think I mentioned on the last podcast that that was when he wanted to, I think, run that up a little bit. And Notre Dame's not Clemson, both in the sense of obviously maybe it's not as good as Clemson, but also doesn't have the same MO, doesn't do all that things in the same way that Clemson likes to. Doesn't have a number one pick quarterback. So comparing scores does no good. But I really don't think there was anything that could have done where I feel this percent much better. But yeah, I don't think you leave this thing concerned more than maybe you already were before. If you have pre-existing concerns, all right, I mean, I get it. But yeah, I don't really think, a fumble in a case and against a team that really tries to strip the ball away really does that, or a couple more penalties against a team that's been, in Notre Dame, it's been very low penalized all year, is really that much of an alarm yet. But I'll tell you the one thing you can take away, I think, is like, who knows, and we'll see if it's sustainable, but just great to see was Dalen Hayes. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's the best game of his career. Lou, do you?
No, he's had some good games, but as conspicuous as he was, and it's interesting how even Brian Kelly after the game said, if there's one takeaway from this game, it was the emergence of Dalen Hayes the way he did, because they have a game changer on the back end with Kyle Hamilton. They have a game changer on the second level with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. The front is solid, and maybe you could make an argument that Isaiah Foskey has that ability to be that game changer as well. But I don't know if he's like that 40, 50 play game guy yet as far as endurance, strength, run support, play after play. But back in July, Patrick, when we had who are the 25 most important players on the Notre Dame team, I had Dalen Hayes, I think, like 3 or 4 behind Ian Book and Kyle Hamilton. And the reason is there are 3 common threads with any championship level Notre Dame team. One is a Hall of Fame head coach. Brian Kelly will be in the Hall of Fame someday, although I'm sure there are some people who would dispute that, but he will be. You need that quarterback who's almost transcendent. I think, you don't necessarily have that with Ian Book. He's a strong 3-year starter who can do many, many good things. He's never going to be put into that Trevor Lawrence category, but at least the experience factor is there. But the third is that dominant guy off the perimeter on defense, specifically as a pass rusher. The best in the last 20 years at Notre Dame was Justin Tuck, and if he would have come back in 2005, he could have made the difference in Notre Dame, being in that championship game that season with the heartbreaking losses, 2 that they had in the regular season. But whether you go back to the Ross Browners or the Alan Pages or the Frank Stamses and the Bryant Youngs, or even Stephon Tuitt in 2012, who had 12 sacks, or Julian Okwara in 2018, who became a force during that 12-0 regular season and was projected as a first-round pick and, got injured the next season, so he dropped to 3rd round. But that's always one of the most instrumental pieces for a championship-level team. And the timing would be right if he can emerge that way.
On your mention of the top 25 we did, I think I ranked Hayes 18th because we hadn't really seen it in spurts of be that dominant edge guy. Good player, respected leader as much as anyone on the team, but we just hadn't really seen yet
And
the
well,
flashes to be an Aquara type guy or that dude as a rusher that you want to see from the Viper spot. So this is absolutely the kind of the thing you really, really wanted to see there as far as, I mean, look, I know we've talked about it a lot recently, and really it's the reason why I keep kind of talking about the pass rush, just getting guys on the ground. And yeah, like you still want to see some sacks. I think this game kind of told you why, and just told you what it looks like when you have that guy of off the edge, not only affecting the QB, but just getting guys on the ground. It just kind of feels like it makes a big difference, right? And Hayes' first sack came right after that 39-yard pass play. Georgia Tech getting a little bit of life, completely snuffed it all out. And yeah, I mean, even if you don't sack them there and you affect the QB, yeah, I mean that's a good thing. But there's times where you can still complete a throw with some heat on you. That right there takes it all away and gives you a chance to strip the ball away and get the ball back like they did. So yes, really, really good sign to see there from Hayes. From the first snap until his last, he was all over the place, much more than those 2 sacks. Really,
yeah,
really.
and you hit on a vital point as to it's not just accumulating the sacks, but when they occur, and that when it occurred was a game-changing time. Like I use Frank Stamps in Notre Dame's last championship season in 1988. Final stats: he had 7 sacks that year. I mean, if you talk to people, it sounds like it was 20 or 25. He was credited with 7, but it's when they came. I mean, 2 crucial ones against Miami that forced fumbles, just like Hayes did. At USC on Rodney P. And everything. But it's also just affecting the game with his presence, where you have to game plan around him and always recognize where he is. And he's going to need that against Clemson as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like that the theory where your number or raw number of a certain impact play category might not be that high, but if you do them all at the right moment, it feels like it's double that. Like if I'm a 25% 3-point shooter, but I hit 3 of them in the last minute of a game, everybody's gonna think I'm great, right? Even though, well, no, the season long things or the percentage there still isn't very good. But yeah, you want to make them count there, and just kind of the same principle of not all yards are created equal. Where I'd rather have 6 yards on 3rd and 5 than 12 yards on 3rd and 14. So yeah, you have to. I think if there's one thing that's this game gave you a little bit more confidence, I guess this was absolutely it in terms of just things that hadn't necessarily all been there before. And I know you'd think, oh, Georgia Tech, whatever. They've been pretty good with not allowing sacks. And it's not like this was a completely overmatched, horribly coached, whatever adjective you want to put on it, line that Notre Dame has seen in some of its previous games. So
yeah, they came in one of the top teams in the country and yielding fewest sacks. They had only given up 10 in 6 games. Plus, they have a very mobile quarterback in Jeff Sims as well, who was their second leading rusher. He's kind of an Ian Book type of figure as far as having that escapability and almost that sense of where the rush is coming from, even though he is only a freshman. So I think that helped just increase, your optimism about, well, maybe they have something going here, because they recorded a season high 5 sacks against a team that was only giving up 1.6 a game.
Right, and then that's with having played Clemson and a couple of good teams in there. It's not like you're playing, who I don't know who off the top of my head it is, but the 5 worst teams in the ACC as far as generating sacks. So I know we talk about it a lot as far as, all right, what can get Notre Dame's offense to the next ceiling thing, and that's downfield plays, chunk passes, deep passing, whatever. Notre Dame had one of those. I believe it was 2 attempts. The one was a catch was to Javon McKinley. Took a shot for Bennett Skowronek early. Wasn't really particularly a great throw, but I don't know that this game made you any more concerned about that? Just because, I mean, there were earlier games where maybe you were worried about that before, and this wasn't worse than that by any means. And also, I don't really think Notre Dame really needed to do it here. I mean, we saw how overmatched Georgia Tech's front seven was. So just line up with your best thing that you do in your offensive line and your running game, and run right at them. So I think that two attempts, and just by watching the game, you could kind of figure this out a little bit, was by more design than it was, oh no, concern about what's happening here with Ian Book.
Yeah. Yeah, well, one of the things that just stood out to me is Notre Dame's first 6 plays, even though there was a mismatch up front, they were all passes. Now, one of them, Ian Book took off on a scramble, but it was just a quick, short passing game. And Notre Dame's, that's kind of been their MO recently is, yes, our identity is as a power running team, outside zone team, but that doesn't mean we force feed it right from the outset. It's just having the open mind that, okay, this is the way the team is playing us, so we're going to just kind of open up some lanes here with the passing game. They were all just very, very short passes early on there, but in that opening drive, which took 8 minutes and 44 seconds, used up 15 plays, Notre Dame was 4 for 4 on third downs, and 3 of them were 3rd and 3 or less. And I believe you had the stat, Patrick, is this year in 3rd and 3 or less situations, Notre Dame is 16 out of 18, I believe, in converting them. So that kind of set tempo for the game as far as just the word I repeatedly use is methodical. This wasn't going to be anything spectacular in the way of big plays. You had a 34 and 31-yard passes to McKinley, and you had a 21-yard run by Tyree and a couple of other 19-yard runs, but it was just very workmanlike in their whole approach.
It's a 28-36 is the number on 3rd and short, 3rd and 3 or fewer, but still very good.
I think for the last 3 or 4 games, though, I think you had 3.
Yeah,
so it was 16 of 18.
Yeah, that's right. And both of them were, I mean, the one in the Georgia Tech game was the last play of the game or whatever, like one of the last 2 plays of the game on the goal line, garbage time, whatever. The other one was a sack on the goal line against Pitt. Game was decided, but yes, you're right. That is the figure, I believe, without having my notes.
By the way, if I may go off track again, Patrick, remember talking about earlier I've never seen so many fumbles return 90-plus yards the other way. Like, when you look at Notre Dame's red zone offense stats, that's not going to look pretty either. But I can't recall seeing so many times in one season this year where the game ends in the red zone and Notre Dame just basically takes a knee like against Louisville and some other teams you mentioned there. And consequently, that goes against Notre Dame's red zone statistics. It's like it comes down as a no score when all you're doing is just running out the clock and taking a knee when you probably could have scored.
Yeah, I think that's happened in 4 games.
Yeah.
Florida State. In South Florida, they were, but they went for it and ran it in. So kind of in that situation too there, but actually got the score. But Florida State, stalled out in the red zone with like a minute left. Obviously garbage time. Louisville, like you said, took a knee twice. Pitt, same thing. Game ended in the red zone, just as it did against Georgia Tech on the goal line. So, yeah, you do kind of have to take those out of the equation when you're looking at the red zone touchdown percentage. Still may not be quite where you want to see it, and the fumble in the red zone didn't help you there. But, yes, any evaluation of Notre Dame's red zone touchdown percentage has to have that into account. And just like, if you have a 3rd downs where it's 3rd and 27 and you can run a draw, like, okay, you're really trying to convert that? Nah. Or if it's, 3rd and 6 from the 40 and you run it and get 4 yards, probably not trying to convert that either because it's 2 down territory. Just kind of little things you got to pay attention to in the stats there. But one little interesting wrinkle I thought we saw that was maybe a little precursor or just a thing that they'll kind of have in their tool belt going forward was ran a few more plays in 2 back sets. Hadn't really seen it much, and when we did, there's really nothing remarkable about them. But yeah, Notre Dame, I think I have it as 4 plays in 22 personnel, 2 running backs, 2 tight ends, and we hadn't really seen that at all. And really, it was kind of a weird 22 in that it's not 2 tight ends, fullback, running back, or whatever, like some I formation you'd find all over the place 40 years ago. But that was really their way of trying to get Braden Lenzy type of sweeps and speed and carries. But Braden Lenzy out, of course, being replaced by Chris Tyree as that speed guy. I mean, those are the 2 fastest players on the offense in all likelihood, right? And Tyree is your speed threat. So that, to me, even though you see the personnel, I think, heavy package, it really was their way of get Tyree in space and have blockers out there. And in the case of the second running back with Kyron Williams, like a guy to fake to get that misdirection. And I mean, they set up in this thing, in this little formation, I think it was 3 times in the first half, got 29 yards combined on the 3 plays. 21-yard run by Tyree was the second one, and that was on the sweep. But they set it up, and this was interesting. Same thing. Kyron Williams in the backfield, Tyree kind of in a bunch out, where the tight end would usually be bunched up with a couple of tight ends. And you fake it to him on a sweep, but Kyron Williams is in the backfield there. And you kind of have to do the same thing, but all right, you give him the same look, but you can either hand it off, which we did in the first play to Kyron Williams, or fake it to him and give Tyree the sweep. And it worked. It was as far as fast guy, ball in his hands, in space, and get the defense moving places to create space. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that we hadn't seen much at all. And maybe it's kind of a look they pull out here a little bit later on in the season or even next week just to try to get either some free yards in a sense with misdirection or just, hey, we want to get Chris Tyree involved because he's fast and he's good and he can help us.
Yeah, it's the deception part that you point out that's important there because it seems even with Tyree, and maybe his hamstring was bothering him in that explosiveness facet of his game, but that's been smelled out by opponents a little bit better this year, or that jet sweep where whether it's been with Avery Davis or others or Lenzy, it's not been instantly as effective as it was last year when Chris had I think a 51-yard touchdown run against USC off that jet sweep. He had a 61-yard touchdown run against Boston College off that same play. So that's something that once it's on film and defensive coordinators start seeing it, it's like when you see a motion or something like that, they smell it out better than they did last year.
I think we'll see it next week. And just because, they gave you multiple looks out of it where, all right, you see the alignment, maybe you think it's coming, but you can still kind of go one of a couple of ways, right? And either one is the ball in the hands of one of Notre Dame's better playmakers and skill position players. So yeah, I would imagine that's not the last time we saw that, especially with, I think we've heard Brian Kelly say a few times, and, you take him at whatever you want at this. But I think I would take his word for it that they want to see more Chris Tyree. I certainly don't think there's a better game for that than this one coming up. So let's wrap up here just with a quick look around the rest of the ACC, which, increasingly looking like, although you don't want to just call it as this, drop dead bar none right now, but it's really only 3 teams that are going to have a great shot at getting in that title game. North Carolina losing to Virginia. 2 losses now in the ACC for the Tar Heels. Still in it very much. Considering they get a shot at Miami and Notre Dame, two of the three teams above them. Notre Dame still has to play Clemson, so not eliminated by any stretch, but you just start thinking and seeing some of these most recent results that are they going to be able to win out and have all that stuff happen? I don't know. I mean, they're giving up a lot of chunks there, and then you kind of get worried about, are they going to be able to stop Miami when they play them? Are they going to slow down, Notre Dame with the running game? I don't know. It just seems like a real tough road for them, and just not only the things they need to happen, but just being able to hold up their end of the bargain and getting the wins. I mean, they're out of the AP poll right now. That means Clemson, only ranked team on Notre Dame's schedule as it stands now. That all of a sudden that game looks a little less daunting just because of some of the defensive things that have happened there for Carolina recently.
Yeah, I think North Carolina was an extremely chic pick in the preseason as, hey, watch out for this dark horse. They have a national championship coach with Mac Brown. That, of course, at Texas, their recruiting has been upgraded. But, it's still a pretty young team, and it hasn't known a lot of great success. So I think there was maybe just a little bit too much too soon projections for them. And I don't know if they were really ready to handle that kind of success. And, when they were ranked number 5 in the country 2-3 weeks ago, it's like, man, are they really the number 5 ranked team? It just didn't feel right. It didn't look right. And I think Mac Brown has even acknowledged that. It reminds me a little bit last year in the NFL, where the Cleveland Browns were the chic pick for everybody. It's like, man, they haven't tasted success in a long time, and they got to know how to handle it first. Now, they're coming out this year, and I think North Carolina next year will be, perhaps one of those top 15 caliber teams. But I just think maybe people got me a little bit ahead of themselves as far as projecting North Carolina. There's still process that they have to go through, and one of them is learning how to handle and deal with success or expectations. Let me put it that way.
Right. That's a good way to put it. And I don't think it's necessarily out of the equation at all that they can finish in the top 25 or anything like that. But as far as a thing of top 2 team in the ACC, New Year's 6, maybe that was a little premature. But at the same time, their skill players are still very good. I mean, I don't.
Oh, no doubt.
I wouldn't think it's a stretch to say you'd rather have Carolina's QBs, running backs, and receivers over Notre Dame's or even anyone in the ACC's, save for Clemson even. But yeah, I mean, maybe the top 15 or, like you said, title game reaching whatever was a bit much. And going to that number 5 ranking, that felt very much like some of these teams that we think are going to be here haven't played yet. So somebody's got to be number 5. We got to put somebody here, and who else?
Yeah.
Honestly, that was the case with Notre Dame at number 3. So,
and speaking of success, and especially dealing with expectations, which is so many times so underrated. I mean, I'm not necessarily an X's and O's guy. I'm more of a human psychology guy. But Louisville. Last year was a perfect situation for Louisville. They were coming off a 3-9 season, have a new coach with Scott Satterfield, and probably more talented than their 3-9 season reflected the year before. And they got caught in the perfect storm. It's like, the expectations were low, and they go 8-5, and it's like, hey, you know what? We did pretty well and all. And Scott Satterfield is named, ACC Coach of the Year, well deserved and everything. So now all of a sudden this year they're preseason top 20, a dark horse, ranked number 3 or 4 behind Notre Dame or Clemson, Notre Dame, and North Carolina in the ACC among the 15 teams. And here they are standing 2-5. That was a team that lost 46-27 to Georgia Tech. So there's this mental process you also have to go through of handling success and dealing with expectations. It's not as easy as it necessarily sounds.
No, not in the slightest. And I think you see that kind of play out every year in a number of different conferences and things. And we can find countless examples of it in really a lot of situations across the country, really. But as far as the ACC title game race goes, winner of Saturday's game really going to have a leg up and be in a real comfortable spot as far as getting into that game. But yeah, you still want to win. I mean, I think Miami's going to have a very favorable path of winning out. Still got to play North Carolina, but we'll see. That's kind of the thing that puts a little bit of a pressure on you here if whoever comes out of Saturday's game having lost it. That you still got to make sure you finish ahead of them, even in Notre Dame's case, if you don't play them. So certainly, I think shaping up into a 3-team race here. So
there's a good news, bad news situation for Notre Dame, where the good news is if you lose, look, you have a chance to win the ACC's title still if you win out, if things fall your way there, and a chance to get back into the playoff on December 19th. The bad news is if you win, you may have to face Clemson again and have to beat them twice in one season. So I'll take the latter part. That's fine either way. But this is the good part of being a conference member, is that one loss doesn't crush you. It doesn't devastate. It's like, oh man, maybe the national title hopes are over or that. There's still a lot to play for.
But certainly still want to win this one, don't you? And now.
Hello,
yeah.
You play to win the game.
Nothing has more obviously been said, and with all of the circumstances with Clemson coming in here, sets up for as good a chance as Notre Dame will have to get that defining win in obviously this year, but going even past in really one of the defining wins, if not the one of the Kelly era. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Irish Huddle. Again, you can subscribe to blueandgold.com using the promo code ND12 FOR1, ND12 for 1. Get access for an entire year for just $12. Please leave us nice comments if you liked what you heard. Leave us a review. Tell your friends about us. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Hit that thumbs up button on YouTube. Again, follow us on Twitter at @PatrickEngel_ and at @BGI_Somogyi. Got a lot of content for you coming up this week on the heels, or leading into, I should say, Clemson's visit on November 7th. There's a couple of bonus episodes of the podcast, as well as a steady stream of content up for you all week long at blueandgold.com. We'll talk to you a few times this week between myself, Lou, and Mike Singer. Till then, take care.